Kavi loved to paint. He lived in a small village near a sparkling river. The river was like a silver ribbon. It flowed past green fields and colorful flowers. Kavi liked to sit by the river with his paints. He painted the trees, the flowers, and the birds. One sunny afternoon, Kavi was sketching. He was drawing the fluffy white clouds in the sky. The clouds looked like cotton candy. Kavi smiled as he dipped his brush into his paint pot. He wished his paintings could be real. How wonderful it would be. Suddenly, Kavi heard a gentle voice. "That's a lovely painting, young man." Kavi looked up in surprise. A kind old woman stood before him. She had sparkling eyes and a warm smile. She leaned on a wooden cane. "Thank you," said Kavi shyly. He wondered who the old woman was. He had never seen her before. "You have a true gift," the old woman said, her eyes twinkling, "and I want to give you something special." She reached into her bag. She pulled out a small wooden box. Kavi's eyes widened. What could be inside? The old woman opened the box. A golden paintbrush lay nestled in soft velvet. The brush shimmered in the sunlight. It looked magical. "This is a magic paintbrush," the old woman explained. "Anything you paint with it will become real. Use it wisely, young Kavi." She handed the box to Kavi. Kavi was amazed. A magic paintbrush! He thanked the old woman. He promised to use the brush wisely. The old woman smiled and walked away. Kavi watched her go. He couldn't wait to try out his new paintbrush. Kavi ran home, clutching the box. He could barely contain his excitement. He burst through the door. His stomach rumbled. He had forgotten to eat lunch. He was so eager to paint by the river. "I'm so hungry," he thought. An idea struck him. The magic paintbrush. Quickly, he took out the golden brush. He dipped it into some brown paint. He painted a loaf of bread on a plate. As soon as he finished painting, the bread began to rise. It puffed up on the plate. It turned a golden brown. Soon, a delicious smell filled the air. Kavi couldn't believe his eyes. The bread was real. Kavi cautiously took a bite. It was the tastiest bread he'd ever eaten. It was warm and soft. The crust was perfectly crisp. The magic paintbrush really worked. Kavi's heart swelled with joy. He wanted to share this magic with everyone. He thought of his neighbors. Many of them were struggling to get by. Their crops had failed, and food was scarce. Kavi grabbed his paintbrush and ran outside. He saw his neighbor, Mrs. Lila. She was trying to comfort her crying baby. The baby was hungry, but Mrs. Lila had no milk left. "Don't worry, Mrs. Lila," Kavi said. He took out his magic paintbrush. He dipped it in white paint and painted a big bottle of milk. The moment he finished, the bottle became real. Mrs. Lila was astonished. "Kavi, you are a lifesaver," she exclaimed. The baby stopped crying and happily drank from the bottle. Kavi smiled. It felt good to help. Section 5. A Village Transformed. Word of Kavi's magic paintbrush spread throughout the village. People gathered at his doorstep, their faces etched with hope. They told him about their needs. Kavi listened patiently. He painted warm blankets for the elderly who felt cold. He painted sturdy shoes for the children who had none. He painted tools for the farmers whose equipment had broken. Gradually, the village began to transform. Laughter filled the air once more. Children played happily with their new toys. Farmers returned to their fields with renewed vigor. The village was no longer a place of scarcity and despair. It was a place of abundance and joy. News of Kavi's magic paintbrush reached the ears of the greedy King Raj. King Raj lived in a grand palace. It was made of gold and marble. He had more riches than he could ever need, yet he always craved more. The king sat on his throne, which was covered in jewels. He listened intently as his advisor whispered about Kavi's magic paintbrush. "Imagine, your majesty," the advisor said, his voice a low murmur. "You could have anything you desire. Mountains of gold, sparkling jewels, the most delicious foods." The king's eyes gleamed with avarice. He imagined possessing the magic paintbrush. He could become the most powerful king in the land. He decided he must have it. "Bring the boy and his magic brush to me at once," he commanded. The very next day, a troop of soldiers arrived at Kavi's doorstep. Their armor clinked as they marched. They looked stern and intimidating. Kavi's heart pounded in his chest. "The king summons you, boy!" the captain of the guards boomed. He had a gruff voice and a menacing mustache. "And bring that magic paintbrush of yours." Kavi knew he couldn't refuse the king's summons. He followed the soldiers to the palace. The villagers watched with worried faces. They feared for Kavi and their newfound prosperity. They arrived at the grand palace. Kavi was ushered into the throne room. He bowed low before the king. "You summoned me, your majesty," he asked, his voice trembling slightly. King Raj grinned, revealing a row of yellowing teeth. "I've heard tales of your magic paintbrush, boy," he said, his voice dripping with greed. "Paint me a mountain of gold, and I shall reward you handsomely." Kavi felt a surge of anger. The king just wanted to use the paintbrush for his own selfish desires. He refused to let the king exploit the magic that had brought so much joy to his village. "I will not use my gift for greed," Kavi declared. He stood tall, clutching his paintbrush. He would not be intimidated. King Raj roared in fury. "Seize him!" he commanded his guards. "And take that brush!" The soldiers lunged towards Kavi, but before they could reach him, Kavi acted quickly. Kavi dipped his brush into orange and black paint. With swift strokes, he painted a fearsome tiger right in front of the king. The tiger sprang to life, roaring ferociously. It had glowing eyes and sharp claws. King Raj had never been so terrified in his life. He scrambled off his throne. He tripped over his own feet. He fled from the throne room, screaming like a frightened child. The soldiers, equally terrified, dropped their weapons and ran after the king. The palace echoed with the sound of their panicked cries. Kavi watched them go, a triumphant smile on his face. Kavi returned to his village a hero. He continued to use his magic paintbrush to help others. The village flourished under his care. It became a beacon of joy and prosperity. As for King Raj, he was never seen in the village again. He had learned a valuable lesson that day. Greed never triumphs.